Hi, I'm Raven Walker, and this is my presentation on why I do history. So, I'm from a small place called Franklin County. I've lived here my whole life. Franklin County is in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Southwest Virginia, about 30 minutes from the North Carolina state line. I've loved studying history from a really young age, and a lot of that is due to our local history here in Franklin County. Franklin County is known as the moonshine capital of the world. We have a very prominent history of moonshining, with many people still doing it today. You won't find many people in Franklin County today that don't have a jar of real, authentic moonshine, or at least know where to get one pretty quick. Franklin County earned its reputation early on during Prohibition when Herbert Hoover organized the Wickersham Commission, which was a task force that kind of investigated local law enforcement agencies and how they were upholding the law, and specifically in regards to the 18th Amendment and prohibition. Um, Franklin County, in particular, found its way onto their radar after it was discovered by the Fleischmann Company, who sold yeast, which is necessary for making liquor, that over the course of 4 years, they sold around 64,000 packs of yeast in the city of Richmond, and during that same time period, sold 2,250,000 packs of yeast in Franklin County, which had a population almost 8 times smaller than that of the city of Richmond. Franklin County also imported 115,000 pounds of copper and 700,000 five-gallon metal containers, which was also really suspicious. So, after 2 years of research and investigation by the Commission, they filed a report highlighting the difficulties of enforcing Prohibition and the 18th Amendment, citing Franklin County as an example. The report claimed that 99 out of 100 people in the county were either making moonshine or had some involvement with illicit liquor. This was probably a bit of an exaggeration, and local law enforcement claimed that it was more around 10/12ths of the adult population. But either way, it was determined that Franklin County, Virginia was producing more illegal liquor during that time period than anywhere else in the country. So, this leads us to the Great Moonshine Conspiracy Trial of 1935. This was the second longest criminal trial in the state's history. Federal agent Thomas Bailey went undercover for a year, posing as a small time moonshine buyer in 1934. He discovered that local law enforcement was accepting bribes to protect moonshiners from federal agencies. And more importantly, he discovered that the governor of Virginia was directing law enforcement to simply fine moonshiners instead of arresting them in order to prevent clogging up the court systems. In the end, a 10-week trial resulted from Bailey's year-long investigation, and prosecutors claimed that Franklin County moonshiners had defrauded the government out of more than $5.5 million in alcohol tax, which would be almost $100 million today. Ultimately, there were 30 people found guilty of crimes related to illegal liquor production, but despite the lengthy trial, it had little impact on the moonshining industry in Franklin County, as the sentences were pretty light, and most of the 30 moonshiners who were found guilty were back in business before the end of the trial. So, why does history matter to me? History matters to me because there are little towns all over the world, just like mine, with their own histories and heritages that influence people's ways of life today. There's also endless numbers of stories, just like the one I just told, and all of those little moments and those places and people add up to create the history of our world. History is often defined by the big moments, the wars, the political movements, the cultural revolutions, and economic events. But these little histories are just as important because individual people make up the big defining moments. Every soldier that ever fought in a war, every politician who ever ran for office, every activist that ever made a difference, every one of those people were part of a greater whole, but they were also individuals with backgrounds and histories of their own. My favorite part of studying history isn't so much about the landmark moments that define our past, but the origins of the people who made the decisions that got us where we are today. So, where do I want to go from here? I currently have a bachelor's degree in English and creative writing. My ultimate goal is to write historical fiction and maybe some nonfiction books. I decided to get my master's in history in order to develop these skills to do better historical research so I can make my writing and storytelling as historically authentic as possible. I think history is one of those things that really a lot of people have to be grabbed by it in order to care about it. And creating media that is entertaining, such as historical fiction books, is a good way to introduce people to historical topics that they may have not cared about in any other circumstance. And so I think it's important, even when writing fiction that is historical, to be as um, correct and to have as much factual information as you can, because it may be a gateway for people who didn't care about history before to become interested in certain topics and lead to them doing further research on their own. So, yeah, I may want to write fiction, but I think it's important to also have a good understanding of history and be able to write it as authentically as possible in order to help spread history throughout the world.